Hey everyone, welcome back to Neighborhood Bible University. Here we are again, and we're moving through the book of Philippians, and we are almost done. We are now in chapter 4, the fourth chapter of 4 chapters. We're getting towards the end of the book, and we're making a huge pivot into the last part of the book where Paul's going to be taking everything he's been talking about so far in chapters 1 through 3 and moving it into a grand application for the Philippians specifically, and as we read it, for us. So I'm Pastor Carey, glad to be here with you again for NBU, Neighborhood Bible University. And again, if you want to look at any of those previous videos, feel free to check out our YouTube channel at Neighborhood Church. You can also go to neighborhoodchurch.com/Phil, P-H-I-L, and find that link and a lot of other good resources there too. Let's dive back into the passage. We're in the very beginning of chapter 4, verses 1 through 3 today. So let's go ahead and do a share screen again and see what we can show you. Here we go. So we are in chapter 4. Again, here's the basic info on the book of Philippians. If you need it, you can pause the screen there. Right now, we are in the end of the book, so we're in the closing applications of chapter 4, 1 through 20. We're going to be looking specifically into this section, our exhortations, and that's just a fancy word for saying, hey, let's do this. Here's what this leads us to. Let's go for it. Here's what we're aiming at. And so here we've got a little bit on chapter 3 that we're going to refer back to. Right now, let's go into here, chapter 4. So let's see if we can bump this up so it's nice and viewable. And Paul says, therefore, my brothers, whom I love and long for, he says, and they're also his joy and crown. His command is stand firm thus in the Lord. And he also calls them my beloved. So we can already see, man, he is just gushing with love for these people. He really knows them. He knew the Philippians. He lived there, worked there for a little while. And he is just so grateful for their support, their partnership in the gospel. He really cares about them. And so he just has done 4 different times mentioning how they are just someone that he really loves and how they've done some cool ministry together. Therefore, like we said, this therefore is referring back to all of the book, everything that he's talked for so far, everything that has been talked about doctrinally and situationally, it's all leading up to these applications here in chapter 4. And he's also specifically referring back to how it can be application. So I think therefore is also like Romans chapter 12, verse 1. He's saying he built up a huge case all through Romans, and he says, therefore, and then he goes into application. So that therefore is pointing, all of the book has been leading up to this, and now he says, let's put it to practice. He says, stand firm thus in the Lord. That's the imperative. That's the request. That's the instructions in the midst of this that stands out. He's saying this is standing firm. That's what we're going to do based on everything we've learned. Thus in the Lord, and that's again a reference to Jesus, the Lord, the master, the boss. So he's saying stand firm. This is actually reminiscent of the main theme of Philippians so far back in chapter 1, verse 27, where Paul has said the same things. He's talking about standing firm in the Lord in unity and for the sake of the gospel. And these are all themes that are going to come up just in this passage already. So just themes that have been repeating throughout the book. So stand firm, thus in the Lord. Thus, he's referring back to how is a word. It's kind of like saying how. How should we stand in the Lord? In this way. In what way? Well, going back to here in chapter 3, he's saying, well, when in my personal examples, I'm pressing on towards the goal of the prize of God in Christ Jesus. And also, brothers, join in imitating me and keeping your eyes on those who walk according to the example you have in us. This is how. This is how. And these are all stemming back from Paul's confession of saying he counts everything a loss compared to the surpassing worth of knowing Jesus Christ, my Lord. That is where true joy is found, in knowing Christ personally. So that's how they can stand firm thus in the Lord. Then he moves on to some specifics. So he says, I entreat Euodia, got these crazy awesome Greek names, and I also entreat Syntyche. Man, is anyone pregnant in the audience? Here's some great baby names, just to log away for later. I entreat Euodia and Syntyche to agree in the Lord. Yes, I ask you also, true companion, help these women who have labored by my side with me in the gospel together, also with Clement and the rest of the fellow workers, and all of them, all of their names are in the book of life. So we've got all these descriptions kind of flowing from these ladies. So we know that just from their names in Greek that these are ladies, Euodia and Syntyche, and also that the pronouns that Paul's using is referring to them as ladies who are helping in the church, help these women. And then he's also referring to some other workers in the church, fellow workers there, that are, we're going to say fellow workers can be plural. Clement is probably a male name. So we've got a great mix of people all helping the church out. We want to ask, who are Euodia and Syntyche? Besides just the fact that they're ladies at the church in Philippi. Well, they were fellow workers. So Paul is saying these were leaders in the church at Philippi, which is not really a far stretch of the imagination, because when Paul first showed up in Philippi, some of the very first converts to the way of Jesus were the people surrounded by Lydia. And if we look in Acts chapter 16, verses 11 through 15, you can see how Lydia plays this prominent role in first accepting Christ as the Messiah and following him. She was a God-fearer at first, knew God was out there, worshiped God, but didn't know about Jesus, and then decided to follow Jesus when Paul and Silas shared Jesus with her. And then she opens up her home. Lydia says, hey, I'm a wealthy lady. I've got this household, these resources. I'm going to open up my home for you guys to stay here while you're here. And it's very likely that the church in Philippi may have started in Lydia's home, if not her being a huge patron or sponsor of the church. So the fact of her being a place of leadership also makes sense that Euodia and Syntyche would also be in positions of leadership as well, along with Clement and fellow workers, and also this true companion. We're going to talk about who that is coming up here pretty soon too. So what is Paul saying? He's saying, stand firm thus in the Lord. This is his main application that he's driving home in verses 1 through 9 in our exhortations section. How do you stand firm thus in the Lord? First, he's saying specifically, you two ladies, agree in the Lord. That's the specifics for you guys right here, right now. Agree in the Lord. And again, the Lord, this is a reference to Jesus, the Lord and Master. How are they supposed to agree? Well, he's saying, one, you guys have labored side by side with me in the gospel together. So yes, they were co-workers with Paul, they were leaders in the church, and they were working for the sake of the gospel. So what Paul's saying is, no, this isn't just a fickle little argument about who got to schedule room 2 for the potluck. This isn't just a fickle thing between them personally about, oh, I just can't stand her. This is a little bit of a disunity about how to live out the gospel. These were church leaders, and these were ladies who were trying to live out what it meant to follow Jesus in a hostile context of the city of Philippi, where being a Christian wasn't popular, it was possibly even treasonous. So how do we do that? Do we blend in with some other Jewish practices that aren't in the gospel? Do we just kind of let it go? Do we just look like everyone else but secretly practice our faith? And there are all these other ways of how do we do the gospel here practically? And Paul's saying, I want you to agree. I want you to agree in how you do ministry, to minister together with a united front, that the church has this unity. And this unity is something he's been talking about all along, right? Chapter 2, verse 2, when he said, have this mindset among you. And then he says, the mindset that was like Jesus Christ, who humbled himself to the point of death, even the death on the cross. And that's all that beautiful stuff in chapter 2. So he's saying, have this mindset. That's the same language here that means to agree in the Lord. Have the mindset of Jesus Christ. There's thinking of others, putting others first, and being unified together. So that's what he's saying to them. He says, hey, and you, true companion, whoever you are. He doesn't name this guy, but it could possibly be Luke. It's got to be someone who's an itinerant traveling pastor, minister with Paul, who he really, really trusts, that had been left behind or sent to Philippi. We know it's not Timothy or Epaphroditus because they're with Paul at the time he's writing this letter. And so it might be Luke, maybe his traveling companion, who wrote most of Acts, all of Acts. He's saying, hey, help these women to, let's all get together and be unified. You're there, help them with that. And he's saying, hey, and then he just goes on to describe more about these great ladies who've helped and worked side by side in the gospel, Clement and the rest of my fellow workers. And then he says, all of them, all these folks he's mentioned here in verse 2 through 3, their names are in the book of life. And that kind of just wraps it up to say, this is still about the gospel. Yes, it's about standing firm in the Lord, and it's about being unified together. Why? Why? For the sake of the gospel, because your names are in that book of life. And he actually refers to, this book of life idea would come from the Old Testament. Psalm 69, verse 28, which says, let them be blotted out of the book of the living. So this is just a reference to the idea of those whose names are reserved for heaven, who've been chosen by God to be in heaven with God now and for eternity, truly part of God's people. So Paul is saying, be unified, work together, you guys, and work together in ministry for the sake of living out the gospel to your neighbors, to your friends, to your family members, so that they will know who Jesus is too, because you have been chosen by Christ, by God, to be in the book of life. So live that out in front of others. So that's what Paul's saying here. Man, it was only three verses, right? But we had a lot of rich stuff to learn from there. So man, think about that in your own life. Where can you be unified with fellow workers in Christ and stand firm in the Lord for the sake of sharing the gospel with other people, living it out? Thanks again for joining us here at Neighborhood Bible University. Look forward to a couple more videos as we wrap up the book of Philippians. It's going to be great. And again, find more resources at neighborhoodchurch.com. Thanks again for joining us, guys.